So welcome everyone to this webinar, this WILPF webinar. For those of you that don't know, I'm Madeleine Rees. I'm the Secretary General of the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom. For anyone who doesn't know about our somewhat lengthy history, we were formed in 1915 to protest the slaughter in the First World War as a result of the spring offensive that was taking place in that war. And here we are again, about to talk about spring offensives in Ukraine, where another lot of men will be thrown under tanks and slaughter will continue. Progress not quite so made as we would hope. In 2015, we had our 100th anniversary, and at that anniversary, which I'm delighted to say MenEngage were fulsomely represented, we came up with and committed, I think, to realizing a vision, and that vision was to end a binary. Building on the brilliant work of people like Cynthia Coburn, who talked about gender relations as being causal of conflict, we saw the need of actually changing the narrative. So understanding that the binary narrative serves patriarchy and patriarchy only. Patriarchy needs and requires a particular performance of gender roles. And if you again watch Ukraine to see how that is being played out, it requires the elevation of men as guarantors of security, and security in our world is seen as militarized. And so it needs a narrative to support that, to make men feel that they need to be part of the military in order to have that role fulfilled. So we believe that you can reframe that narrative. If you understand the root causes of our performativity, then you can actually move towards inclusivity, which will break down the narrative, and we believe end violence and misogyny. We hope we'll be proved right. This project, of which this webinar is the outcome of the launching of the films and the research which was done in 4 countries, we think is a first step. We have a brilliant project team who managed to put this together. We've had amazing support from the Canadian government. And what we are hoping is that we will be able to build on this to really understand better what we need to do to destroy and undermine completely the binary narrative that forces men into roles that lead to violence and to conflict. And with that, we're going to start a short film just by way of introduction, and you will see the direction in which this project is taking us. Thank you and enjoy.
Militarized masculinity, I want to refer to it as the violent power of men. You have power. How do you use your power?
Men are craving to prove others and to prove themselves that they are true men. And the military action gives you that opportunity. C'est une masculinité où tout est contrôlé. Militarized masculinities is poison that dehumanize men and subordinates and oppress women.
Una de las cosas que busca todo proceso de instrucción militar es suprimir las emociones y la capacidad de sentir empatía por las emociones de otras personas. Es lo que nos ha llevado en Colombia a tener uno de los conflictos armados más largos del mundo.
For a long time in Afghanistan, people have really utilized cultural norms and societal norms to prioritize men and to give men more privileges than women.
Not all men fit the bill of being violent, abusive, and going for militarization.
Vous comprenez, à l'époque, ce sont ces hommes qu'on considérait comme nos bourreaux. Mais quand vous voyez vos bourreaux qui commencent à venir plaider pour vos droits spécifiques, vous vous dites peut-être que l'approche sera bonne. C'est là où nous essayons de contrer tout ce qui est masculinité militarisée.
We cannot achieve our results if we don't have people like you. Because if we do have your support, we are going to be able to have the support of other chiefs, which is very critical because the violence is happening in the communities.
we're taught that this is the way the world is. This is sort of the dominant narrative, but it's not actually in reality the dominant scene. So what we need to do is dig in, find the examples of countries, of societies, communities, households that live differently, and build those up as the norm. What is it that we could actually create instead of the system that we have today?
Hello, everyone. My name's Alan Greig. I'm going to be moderating the session today. So welcome to you all, and it's fantastic that so many of you have been able to join us. It really is a tremendous honor and privilege for me to be in conversation with this wonderful set of speakers that we have, who will be discussing the research that they'll be doing in the 4 countries, Afghanistan, Cameroon, DRC and Colombia. So you see the speakers there. I'll ask them in a few minutes to introduce themselves. So I'm not going to go through those introductions now, but I do want to just review a little bit of the housekeeping and give you a sense of how the session is going to go. We're going to run for 90 minutes, and the session will be recorded. Webinar participants are muted, but we encourage you to introduce yourselves in the chat and use the Q&A function to post your questions or comments. And we'll have about 15 minutes at the end where we'll go through some of those big questions that are coming up from you and see if we can respond to those. Very importantly, we have simultaneous interpretation in French, Spanish and Pashto. And if you look at the bottom of your screen, there's an interpretation icon and you can click there. You'll see French indicated there. You'll see Spanish there. Unfortunately, we weren't able to add Pashto because it's not in the Zoom list of languages. So the Pashto translation interpretation will be under the Portuguese button. So click on Portuguese if you want a simultaneous translation in Pashto. There we go. So the agenda, we'll done some welcome from Madeline, who set the scene very clearly, and the video, I think, does a fantastic job of raising these issues around narratives and pressures around masculinity and militarism and how that fuels armed conflict. The way we're going to do it is we're not going to do a kind of series of presentations. We want to do an interactive discussion and conversation between the panelists and myself. So we've identified a set of themes emerging from the research, and I've got a couple of questions under each of those themes, and I'll put those questions to specific speakers in relation to specific themes, and we'll build up the conversation that way. And I think that will give you a great sense of the richness of the research that's been done in the 4 countries. So the themes will be the process of the research itself, because I think it's a very unusual effort to generate research from the ground up. So it's research done by and for the people who are most affected by the armed conflict in those countries. And then we're going to talk about men's experiences of militarism and armed conflict, suffering associated with those experiences, the ways in which masculinities and the narratives that Madeline talked about are used by different forces to mobilize men to fight. We're going to link those issues around masculine norms to in what ways do they determine men's involvement in armed conflict, and how are they linked to broader political and economic conditions. And then we're going to ask all of the speakers to reflect on what they're finding out about men's current activism for feminist peace, and what more work is needed to mobilize men to get more involved in work for feminist peace. So those are the themes that we're going to be discussing. Perhaps we can turn to introduce the speakers. So Annie, do you want to go first? Do you want to introduce yourself, and then we'll move around the panel that way? Hi, Annie. Can you hear me, Annie?
I'm not sure Annie is here. I'm going to find out who she is, so if we might need to move on.
Okay. Jamila, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm Jamila Afghani, WILPF Afghanistan president, and I'm glad to be part of this wonderful project. And I'm happy to be with you all today. Thank you.
Thanks, Jamila. Verónica?
Hi, everyone. My name is Verónica Recalde. I'm the project coordinator for WILPF's Colombia Confronting Militarized Masculinities initiative, as well as the anti-militarist area. And I'm thrilled to be here and hear about all the experiences we had together doing this research.
Thank you. Guy?
Merci, merci Alan. Bon après-midi à tout le monde. Je m'appelle Guy Feugap, je suis le directeur des programmes à la section camerounaise de WILPF. Et c'est avec plaisir que je coordonne l'initiative au Cameroun d'engager les hommes et les garçons pour la construction de la paix. C'est un plaisir d'être ici avec tout le monde. Merci.
Thanks, Guy. Sylvie?
Yes, thank you so much, Alan. Greetings, everyone. I hope you can hear me. Can you?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yes, I am Sylvie Jacqueline Ndongmo. I'm from Cameroon. I'm a WILPF International president. I'm also founder of WILPF Cameroon. I'm happy to have contributed along with Guy and the team in Cameroon and the team in other countries to make this project a reality. So I'm happy that we are here today, getting to know and to understand some of the outcome of this important project. Thank you.
Thanks, Sylvie. Annie? Okay, let's see if we can get in touch with Annie.
I'm going to work on that now.
Okay, thanks, Rebecca. Laxman.
Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, where you are. My name is Laxman. I'm one of the co-directors of MenEngage Global Alliance, and I'm really looking forward to listening and the conversation in this webinar. So yeah, over to you, Alan.
Thanks, Laxman. And Dean, do you just want to, Dean's not an official speaker, but he's been steering the project since 2020. So just want to say hi, Dean.
Hi, Alan. Yeah, thanks so much. And great to see everyone here. Fantastic to see all of the authors and contributors to the research and all of you online. And it's been a fantastic project to be a part of. Thrilled that we are launching these research reports. And Alan, thank you for moderating and all the work you did to produce your summary report. There's lots of good reading to be done. So thank you.
Thanks, Dean. Annie, are you with us? Okay, we'll chase up Annie. Yeah, so as Dean said, there's a tremendous amount of work has been done on this project, and I don't know if you haven't already had the chance to check out all the reports on the WILPF site. I encourage you to do so. We can post the link in the chat as well. I think it was in the initial invitation for the webinar, but each country produced its own study report and a literature review and one or more reports on specific issues related to militarized masculinities in those 4 countries. So I encourage you to delve into that work. And, you know, and just to acknowledge that, as Madeline said, we have the 1-year anniversary of the Russian invasion of Ukraine coming up at the end of this week. That war devastating as it obviously is, has tended to take attention away from the other wars that predate it and are continuing in Yemen, in Syria. We have counter-insurgency operations by the French and the Americans ongoing in the Sahel. Brown University observed last year that the US is involved in counterinsurgency operations in 85 countries now. So war is an ongoing condition which many people in the world are living through on a daily basis. So these questions about how do we mobilize men for feminist peace, really change this narrative around masculinity and militarism and push for demilitarization is more urgent than ever. I should also note that the US Department of Defense is the biggest consumer of fossil fuels in the world. So the crisis of militarism is also very much linked in to the climate catastrophe that's unfolding all around us and affecting many people in the world in different ways. So there's a real urgency to this work, and the work that's been done by the speakers and their colleagues really sheds some light, I think, on how we can move forwards. So the first theme that we wanted to talk about was the research process itself. There's a lot of talk about decolonizing research and knowledge production. A lot of the research on gender and militarism has been done, from academic institutions in the global north, often looking at communities in the global south. So this work was definitely set up very differently. So questions to Sylvie, Guy and Verónica. Tell us about, how did you design your research? What did you do? What was the process you followed? And how did you see the research process itself contributing to feminist peace building? Who wants to take that one? Verónica?
Thank you. So at first, we were interested in identifying what factors we could look into to understand how militarized masculinities are constructed in Colombia. Of course, this is, as the video said, one of the longest armed conflicts in the world that we have here. And the peace process that we had in 2016 was, and still is, a very difficult one to implement. So we wanted to understand why that is and how we can approach this idea that masculinities are, every single masculinity in Colombia is affected by militarization. Mm-hmm. So the research was directed at studying the causes of militarized masculinities, which are distributed, we found, in two general aspects: cultural and institutional. Militarized hegemonic masculinities establish a series of cultural and institutional factors that exist within the culture, and a series of practices and habits from which violent actions become part of everyday life, which has meant that for generations, the idea that war is something that to live with has been accepted. It wasn't questioned at all. So the presence of the military and other armed actors was not questioned either. So we wanted to see how these two factors could or work together, and how they worked together differently in children, in teenagers, and then in adulthood. So this was the main question that we posed for ourselves. And we had found through that the work for feminist peace has been building from civil society, not only from feminist women, but also men who are interested in questioning that institutional and cultural power that is militarization.
Yeah. And I know you brought together a few organizations, right, to do the research. Just tell us briefly about that coalition that you brought together.
So WILPF Colombia worked very closely with a local organization that works with conscientious objectors. And the project was directed towards that as well, the work that this organization does in Colombia to help young men understand that they have the right to say no to war and to not go to war. So they do wonderful work with young men to show them how they can access this right that they already have.
Fantastic. Sylvie, Guy, tell us about your research process.
Okay. Yes, I want to talk about the case of Cameroon. We had two things in mind when we started the research. We wanted to know what are the causes and manifestation of militarized masculinity within the country, and also the strategies that were being used to counter the militarized masculinity, and instead also see the strategies to mobilize men for feminist peace. So it was about who are the people doing that, and we were able to speak to civil society organization, to non-state armed group, which is very, very important. We were able to speak to non-state armed group. We had interview with community leaders, traditional leaders, religious leaders, community groups in general, and civil society organization. And we organized focus groups and also direct interviews. And one of the important strategies that we used was solidarity dialogue. In the communities where we were able to have solidarity dialogue and to bring on board different key stakeholders in the community. Some of the figures that I can share is that we are able to have representative to meet with representative of 44 civil society organizations, 15 focus group discussion with a total of 174 participants, 79 men, 95 women. We had 56 interviews with community leaders, including 28 with traditional leaders and 28 with religious leaders. These are very critical actors in the community in Cameroon. We also have 12 interviews with state armed group, and 11 men and 1 woman, and 9 men from non-state armed groups, and 8 solidarity dialogue. And I want to say that we also, in terms of methodology, had a kind of review of existing literature, because we thought that it was very important. When we do a research, you are not starting from scratch. It's always very important to see what others have done before, if there is existing literature around the topic you are working on. And we also made sure that we build some alliances, because we thought that we are getting into something very important and we need strong advocacy. So alliance building was one of the things that we thought was very important. We had dialogue session with different social groups and in the different communities, and we collected some data in the field, informal interview and through focus group discussion, as I've said. And how did we do that? I'm going to end here. How did we make it? It was a research process contributing to the goal of feminist peace. So we made inclusivity a reality. We thought that it was very important to hear from different stakeholders. We had an analysis with a feminist lens. We also tried to highlight what was the specific role of men and women. We tried to see in the communities, what are the role played by men? What are the role played by the women? And what are the paths that women and men were doing together? So we wanted to look into all this, and especially be able to point out the manifestation of these militarized masculinities, and make sure that those people that we are having on the field become like the alliance that we are going to have to push for our advocacy. So I'm going to stop here and allow Guy to compliment. Thank you.
Fantastic. Well, perhaps Guy, can you tell us a little bit more about the solidarity dialogues and what you did there? And also maybe, because I know from reading the material from Cameroon since 2016, when the conflict began, it's been extremely violent, many brutal killings. So people are dealing with a lot of trauma in relation to that violence and armed conflict. So how did you did you manage those feelings in those solidarity dialogues? Guy, what do you think?
Vous m'entendez? Je peux parler?
Oui.
OK.
Yeah,
OK, merci Alan. Le dialogue de solidarité, comme vous le mentionnez bien, était, comme Sylvie l'a dit, l'une des méthodes à travers laquelle nous avons pu rentrer en contact des personnes que nous avons rencontrées et des divers groupes dans les communautés. Alors, tel que nous les avons organisés, les dialogues de solidarité, c'était des groupes inclusifs qui prenaient en compte les organisations de la société civile, les leaders communautaires et même les autorités administratives. Et aussi, nous avions des groupes de femmes, des groupes de jeunes. Tous étaient présents pendant ces sessions de dialogue. Et une autre particularité pour ces dialogues, c'est que nous mettions en présence des personnes qui ont été diversement affectées par les conflits, que ce soit des hommes et des femmes. Alors, le fondement pour ces sessions de dialogue, c'était de laisser les gens s'exprimer. C'était de laisser les gens s'exprimer pour que nous, sans influence, sans question particulière d'orientation, nous puissions avoir les perceptions que les groupes dans les communautés ont des conflits, d'une part, et des rôles que les acteurs dans les conflits jouent. Et comme vous l'avez dit, il y avait beaucoup d'émotions qui étaient perceptibles à travers l'expression des uns et des autres. Et le fait que nous ayons laissé la parole à chacun de s'exprimer librement, sans orienter par des questions spécifiques, a permis de comprendre à quel point les conflits touchent aussi bien les femmes que les hommes. Nous avons pu remarquer qu'on ne dit pas souvent que les conflits ont un impact sur les garçons aussi, parce que dans la perception collective qui dégageait avant que nous ne commencions les dialogues de session, c'était que nous voulions faire une recherche pour parler des femmes, parce qu'au Cameroun, on a dit WILPF, c'est WILPF, Organisation des femmes, alors c'est pour parler des questions des femmes. Alors il y avait une perspective nouvelle qui est entrée en jeu pour voir comment l'agenda des femmes ne fonctionne pas très bien parce qu'ils ne travaillent pas en synergie avec les hommes. Et le fait qu'on ait pu laisser ces différents groupes interagir ensemble au cours des dialogues de session a permis aux femmes et aux hommes de comprendre qu'il y a urgence, en fonction des impacts qu'on a des conflits sur les femmes et les filles, il y a urgence de faire en sorte que les femmes et les hommes travaillent ensemble pour pouvoir repousser ces différentes formes de masculinité qui se dégagent dans les communautés. Voilà.
Fantastic. Thanks, Guy. And I think the point about, that those dialogues don't necessarily just happen. So we need to create specific spaces and processes to help them happen and help people kind of deal with the emotions that will and the feelings that will be in the room when we're trying to talk about how to bring an end to this armed conflict. That's a great start. So the second theme that we talked about coming out from the research was trying to get a better sense of the range of men's experiences of being militarized and mobilized to fight, and men's experiences during armed conflict itself. So let me turn to Jamila and Annie. What were you learning from your research about this, the range of men's experiences during armed conflict?
Thank you, Alan. I don't know, I jump in. It was my turn.
No, please.
Yeah, as you all know, unfortunately, in Afghanistan, we are experiencing war and conflict for more than 4 decades. And we have lost thousands of lives in the war and conflict. And our country is full of widows and orphans and disabled people who lost their body parts and their family parts during the war and conflict. And during our research and during our solidarity dialogues, and also we also had a training component in our project, the experience of men, youths were totally different. That we considered that men are going to fight and kill each other, but we found that men and boys were pushed to go for war because of the culture, because of the society setup, because of the family setup. They were pushed to go to war. And those who had the experience of war, killing, or many other tragedies during the conflict, it had a very bad impact on their mind, on their psychosocial health, on their physical health, and also on their relationship in the family and in the society. So that's why, unfortunately, the cycle of war or cycle of conflict is going on like a change from one generation to other generation. And currently you're seeing that Afghanistan is in the hand of a totally militarized armed group who are believing in gender apartheid, and they are just believing in elimination of women from all aspects of life. And the reason for this type of harsh attitude is the conflict, or that militarized masculinity mindset is coming from one generation to the other generation. And with each generation, it is becoming more harder, more complicated, more challenging, more difficult. And that's why we are facing this situation. And in this research, we have other very different elements, and I wanted to focus on this. And this is very crucial for all of us as a feminist activist around the world, or as a feminist human rights defenders. We need to flip the coin. We need to work on the other side, that this militarized masculinity, which has put our world into war, and every day new wars are emerging, we need to switch back. We need to look from different angles and perspective, how to work with youths, how to work with men, how to work with the community leader, how to work with religious leaders, how to work with influential leaders, men and women in the society, to change this narrative.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah. Annie, does that resonate with you in terms of what you were finding in the DRC? Hey, Annie, are you there? Oh, there we go. Hi, Annie. Okay, well, I can see Annie's there and unmuted herself, but I'm not seeing her come up. So Jamila, just say a little bit more about this this pressure. Oh, there we go. Hey, Annie. I can't hear you at the moment. Annie, I think there's a problem with your sound. Rebecca, can you maybe follow up with Annie?
I will, yes.
Oh, okay, okay. Jamila, just to come back to you then, where's this pressure coming from, or who are the forces that are pressuring men into fighting?
Afghanistan is a very tribal country. We have a very man-dominated and patriarchal customary laws in our family and our society. Usually, families are very happy to have a baby son in their families, because that baby son from the first day of coming to the world will come with putting a huge amount of responsibility to the shoulder of that son, that he is breadwinner of the family, he is the inheritor of the family respect and dignity. So from the very childhood, from the very first day, the family, relative, father especially, is putting pressure on the child that you have to behave in certain ways, you have to live in certain ways, you have to do some certain activities, you don't have to do some certain activities. And this is the mindset which is growing up with the age of a child, as a baby son or a child in the family. And in this way, like those men who are in very youth age in our society, usually youth in our society is considered to be a very dignified man, and the dignified man in our society is given the role of harsh behavior and attitude, and to keep the rule of upper-handedness over the female family member, over the society during their attitude. Like usually this type of mindset is coming from the mother of the family, from the father of the family, from the grandparents of the family, from uncles, aunties, then overall as the large in our society. So most of the boys that they took part in our interviews or in our solidarity dialogue, they were very much psychologically under pressure. They were saying, like, we are fed up of war. How long we should be in fighting in war? Our other nations in the world, they are enjoying a better life, but we are always in the cave, we are always in the mountains, we are fighting with each other, we are killing each other. So this was very disturbing situation with most of them. And there is no single family in Afghanistan that who do not have a martyr, or whose son is not killed, whose son or daughter is not disabled. Like, this country is going towards a dilemma that each and everybody has in certain ways difficulty. And as a nation, everybody is fed up of this situation.
Thanks, Jamila. Well, let me turn to Sylvie and Guy, because I think you found something similar, right, in terms of the pressure on young men in particular to fight. Tell us about what you found about men's different experiences, and also the different ways in which men are suffering from the armed conflict. Sylvie or Guy?
Okay, I thought Guy had to start, but I can go ahead and then Guy will jump in. Yes, looking at the context of Cameroon, and before we came in, the popular assumption and the studies so far have shown the impact of conflict on women, most especially. But in this specific case, we were able to see that men and boys do also suffer from the conflict, and they are also affected. Some of the things that we found are deaths, of course, some are killed, and loss of livelihood, school dropout, because they are forced. If we look at the case of the conflict, the northwest and southwest of Cameroon, young boys were able to stop going to school because they were kind of being harassed, and harassed and displaced because they are forced to join the armed group, and if not, they are forced to flee. If not, they are going to either to be killed or forced to join them. And many boys that are now internally displaced are not because of their will. They are being threatened either they have a choice to make. Either you join the armed group or you are killed. So many families run at night to secure or to save their boys. So also the denial of the war. We see the war going on, but from the government perspective, nothing is going, everything is okay, everything is very okay. When everything is okay, and we, at the same time, we know everything is not okay, then there are people suffering out of it, and boys suffer out of it, and the violent political discourse, the widespread discourse of terrorists, you know, especially in the English part of the country where the war is raging, there's no difference between, sometimes many boys are caught just for being, they are innocent, but they are just considered terrorists because they are 15 years old, between 15 and 24. So they're kind of victims. And also, these boys really do suffer a kind of stereotype that we have in the community, because we know that, especially from the military perspective, they will go into the community, but they will consider that boys between 15 and 24 are potentially those who are joining the armed groups. So the least thing that happened in the community, they don't think so much. They just go and just carry everyone along, which is something very critical. And also the thought that they have about the military and the men. You know, we live in a patriarchal society, and it is said that, in quotes, that men, they have power, they are very strong, they don't need to. So some of these boys, some of these men, even though they are suffering so much, they will not pretend, they will not show that they are suffering, because society consider them as those very powerful, those people who will never speak. So this is a kind of drama. Some of them are really suffering in their bones, but they cannot, they have to pretend and appear the way the society want them to look like. So many of them are really dying, but they cannot speak out, because in the community, they will be considered as women crying on a daily basis. Meanwhile, this is not the role of a woman, of a man to cry. Some are not happy, especially from the military side. They are not happy to be away from their family. They are not happy to be in those camps. But because of the society, they are forced to be there, but they cannot speak out how they are feeling. I'll stop here and allow who's already to come in. Thank you.
So that reminds us of Madeleine's point about the narratives, right? The binary narratives of men, women in relation to war and armed conflict, but those same narratives can make it hard for men themselves to talk about their own suffering and experiences. Guy, do you want to just pick up on that, and also perhaps say something about how are humanitarian agencies in Cameroon dealing with this issue of men's suffering?
Bon, déjà, avant de parler des humanitaires qui essaient de résoudre ce problème, il faut déjà dire quelque chose que nous avons appris de ces souffrances que les hommes et les garçons endurent de façon spécifique. C'est que jusque-là, on ne réalisait pas que les hommes sont aussi des êtres humains normaux qui ont des sentiments humains qui peuvent l'exprimer. Et c'est en conduisant cette recherche-là que nous avons compris qu'il est important que de temps en temps, on s'arrête aussi sur les besoins de paix spécifiques que les hommes et les garçons ont. Alors, il y a ce problème psychologique, cet impact psychologique important sur la vie des jeunes, des garçons qui sont sur le terrain de la guerre en particulier, que ce soit des groupes armés étatiques ou alors des groupes armés non étatiques. Parce que beaucoup sur le terrain combattent parce qu'ils sont en train d'exécuter un ordre. Ils sont en train de faire la volonté d'un groupe qui n'est pas forcément la volonté qu'eux, ils partagent. Et ça leur cause un traumatisme. C'est pourquoi des témoignages de certains que nous avons rencontrés nous disent qu'ils sont parfois obligés de prendre des substances, des drogues, pour pouvoir avoir le courage de commettre certains actes sur le terrain. Comme je le dis, justement parce qu'ils font la volonté qui n'est pas la leur. C'était un problème. Et En termes de recommandations, pour revenir à la question des humanitaires, ce que l'on fait, on constate que la plupart des réponses qui sont apportées aux crises ne tiennent pas généralement compte au Cameroun des besoins spécifiques des hommes. Il y a plusieurs programmes qui répondent aux besoins des femmes affectées par les conflits. Et une recommandation de la recherche faite ici au Cameroun demandait justement aux partenaires de développement de veiller à ce que chaque fois qu'il y a une initiative qui est développée pour répondre aux crises, qu'on réponde aux besoins des femmes, mais aussi qu'on réponde aussi aux besoins spécifiques des hommes. Parce que dans la guerre, les hommes ont des traumatismes particuliers qui nécessitent quand même d'être regardés de près. Et nous avons dû faire cette recommandation parce que on a constaté avec les sensibilisations qu'on peut accepter que les garçons ont des problèmes spécifiques, mais le fait de ne pas pouvoir apporter des réponses spécifiques continuait de faire croire que ce n'est pas une priorité que de répondre aux besoins des garçons. Le fait, par exemple, que, prends l'exemple pour le gouvernement de ne pas faire quelque chose pour arrêter la guerre, malgré que nous ayons montré les impacts, que ce soit pour les femmes ou pour les filles. Le fait de ne pas prendre des mesures comme un dialogue inclusif pour arrêter la guerre fait en sorte que les hommes sont obligés de porter la casquette de héros malgré eux pour continuer de combattre. Et ça fait partie également, donc il n'y a pas que les humanitaires auxquels nous faisons des recommandations, il y a également le gouvernement auquel nous avons fait on a fait des recommandations de pouvoir faire tout ce qui est possible pour arrêter la guerre, parce que la guerre a des impacts sur toutes les catégories de différents groupes sociaux. Voilà.
Thanks, Guy. I know similar findings came out from the research in the DRC. Annie, can you speak to that? I do want to bring in Annie if we can, because the DRC research was very rich. There was a lot that came out from the study there. Hey, Annie.
Merci. Est-ce que vous m'entendez? Allô?
Yes.
Yes.
Great.
OK. Merci pour ce webinaire. Je voudrais parler de comment nous avons mené la recherche en République démocratique du Congo. Cette recherche a été faite dans 3 zones, à savoir la ville-province de Kinshasa, la province du Nord Kivu, à Goma, et aussi à Sake. Sake, c'est à presque 30 km de Goma, et à Ituri, dans la ville de Bunia. La recherche voulait comprendre les causes et les manifestations de masculinité militarisée et quelles stratégies pouvaient être utilisées pour mieux mobiliser les hommes et les femmes pour la paix féministe. 3 questions clés ont été exploitées dans cette recherche, à savoir quelles sont les causes profondes des conflits, comment contribuer à une nouvelle orientation vers une paix féministe et comment utiliser une meilleure compréhension de genre qui amène à la masculinité militarisée pour avoir une paix féministe. Après avoir étudié profondément toutes ces 3 questions clés que je venais d'énumérer, nous avons eu à travailler aussi avec Living Peace, qui est basé à Goma. Nous avons interrogé les anciens combattants, donc les personnes qui sont entrées dans l'armée pendant le conflit. Ce sont des jeunes garçons, mais qui sont sortis pour savoir pourquoi ils sont entrés et pourquoi ils sont ressortis et s'ils ont encore besoin de retourner dans la guerre comme parfois des enfants soldats. Nous avons eu à interroger aussi des militaires qui étaient dans les camps et ça, nous avons eu Living Peace qui est basé à Goma qui nous a aidés pour interroger les militaires qui étaient dans les camps. Nous avons eu à interroger aussi à Kinshasa les hommes politiques pour faire comprendre à ces hommes qui sont dans les institutions de l'État, c'est quoi cette masculinité militarisée que nous étions en train de parler. Nous avons eu à interroger aussi les chefs de famille, les hommes dans les ménages et aussi les chefs religieux. Les chefs religieux et les chefs traditionnels pour voir un peu leur compréhension en termes de masculinité militarisée. Et en se basant sur l'agenda 2063 de l'Union africaine, qui a fourni aussi une feuille de route pour parvenir à la paix sur le continent. Et cet agenda a souligné la nécessité de mettre fin à toutes les guerres ou les conflits ou les violences basées sur les genres. Après avoir interrogé ces personnes, il était difficile de faire progresser la paix féministe si les masculinités militarisées ne sont pas rendues visibles et prises en compte dans des démarches et entreprises pour l'efficacité de l'agenda femmes, paix et sécurité. En effet, les normes sociales de genre associent la masculinité au pouvoir, à la violence, au contrôle, renforcent la hiérarchie entre les sexes et favorisent l'exclusion. Elle joue aussi un rôle important dans l'alimentation des conflits et de l'insécurité. Comme vous savez, la RDC va bientôt avoir 3 décennies dans le conflit et nous avons vu que la masculinité militarisée dans l'alimentation des conflits aussi. Et pour promouvoir la paix féministe, il est également essentiel d'œuvrer à une transformation des normes actuellement acceptées. Et nous avons fait quelques recommandations. Et d'abord, c'est de rendre les hommes et les masculinités militarisées visibles pour faire progresser la paix féministe. Parce que aussi longtemps que la masculinité n'est pas militarisée, n'est pas réellement prise en compte à l'ensemble des politiques et des programmes avant d'être à la problématique du genre, qu'ils en soient intégrés dans la dimension sur les masculinités militarisées. Il faut aussi déconstruire les masculinités militarisées pour promouvoir et mettre en œuvre des programmes d'éducation communautaire et de mobilisation pour la transformation des normes sexo-spécifiques néfastes. Et aussi, on doit lutter contre la transmission intergénérationnelle des traumatismes et des conflits. Parce que quand nous avons interviewé les gens, par exemple, dans les zones où il y a des conflits, nous avons remarqué que ces problèmes de la transmission intergénérationnelle continuent à exister jusqu'à aujourd'hui. Et enfin, nous avons recommandé aussi d'œuvrer pour la création d'un environnement sûr et propice avec des limites d'une bonne gouvernance et un système de justice équitable et accessible pour contribuer à la création de cet environnement. On devrait mettre des politiques et des programmes qui permettent de remédier aux insécurités économiques et aux inégalités à l'origine des conflits. Et enfin, il fallait œuvrer contre la prolifération et la banalisation de l'image de l'arme à feu en appuyant la mise en œuvre de la réforme du secteur de sécurité. Voilà en gros ce que je peux dire pour le moment. Merci beaucoup.
Yeah. Fantastic. Thanks, Annie. So that, yeah, there's a lot there. Thinking about these issues of economic security and poor governance, we'll come back to those in a minute. I just want to flag this point about, you mentioned the work of Living Peace. And if people don't already know about the Living Peace project, go check it out on the web. It's a tremendous example of work that's being done with men involved in armed conflict to help them deal with their trauma and shame and open up about their emotional experiences, because it's the emotional repression of those experiences that actually helps continue the armed conflict itself, and helping men deal with that can be a route to mobilizing men for feminist peace. But let me turn to Verónica, because one of our themes was around the ways in which ideas about masculinity are used by political and economic elites to mobilize men to fight, to pressure men into fighting. What did you find out about that in Colombia?
Thank you, Alan. Well, we have found that the mandates of hegemonic masculinity are intertwined with the beliefs and practices and also the rituals of this militaristic society. And by that, I mean a society that has normalized for decades the use of force as a valid mechanism to resolve conflicts. It's also a society that has linked its own identity with a militaristic narrative centered on the figure of this soldier hero and the ritual of war or combat as this emancipatory event. And that is exactly what militarism does, promoting values that are gradually installed in our society until the exercise of violence and the figure of the warrior become intrinsic elements of everyday life. And I think this was made very explicit when we worked with young men, very young men, who live in different territories around Colombia. And what they said was that, well, militarism has always been part of their everyday life, and the values that come with that, and the expectations also about where their life should be headed. We found that the presence of the military in these territories is very problematic, because they're not there to only have control of that territory in relation to other armed groups, but also to recruit young men from those territories that are very economically vulnerable, so they know where to go. And also the ways they install these values are, as I said it in the beginning, are very cultural. So they go and they show these young men that being a soldier is cool, and being a soldier is going to bring honor to the family, and it's also going to bring them stability, which they don't have at the moment. And in that scenario, the only stability that they could find is through the military. So young men grow up thinking and believing that joining the military is the only option, because if they don't, the only other alternative is to join illegal armed groups, and they know that's going to be a problem as well. So becoming a man in a militaristic society becomes this journey marked mainly by violence, whether it is symbolic or physical or structural or institutionalized, a violence that leaves like really difficult scars to heal in the social fabric and the reconstruction, which is what we're trying to do with the peace process that we signed. It leaves this this daily narrative and this orality almost as a way of dealing with the burden of growing up in a place that has no dignified living conditions for them. So I think confronting this type of masculinities must be done in principle by dismantling this cultural system that normalizes and accepts these gender expressions. Because as I said, it's not only that they install it culturally, so we are brought up to believe that this is our idea, This idea of security, that the military should be everywhere and that violence should be the way to deal with the effects of war, as if that same violence doesn't reproduce the war itself. Something that we ignore because we're not brought up to believe that. But it's also that there are institutional powers that put all their resources, all their money to make sure that that happens.
Yeah.
So if you see, the military in Colombia is very well trained. It's trained by countries from the global north. It is sold weapons from the global north, and all the resources that we need for those precarious conditions that these young men and women are living in are used to expand the military and to make it more and more powerful. So we can have this cultural values working without the institutional power that requires. So it's very interesting because we worked with young men, as I said, children as well, who told us about their experience with the military from a very young age. There was this one time where we were in a territory called Bolívar here in Colombia, and at the end of one of the workshops of the Solidarity Dialogues, we decided to do this mural in their neighborhood. And the mural was about peace and sort of coming together to learn about peace. And as we were painting with the children, they said, well, this is fun and all, but in a few days, the military is going to come and they're going to take this all down. So we better not be here to let them know that we were the ones who did it. And they just said it as something, completely normal. It wasn't even a concern. They were just telling us the story of their everyday life. So it was those moments, even more so than the workshops itself, that really made all of this explicit for us and to understand it in a very different light.
And the risks people are running by trying to resist that pressure to be involved in the militarist culture. Trying to step outside that is very difficult. But I know we're going to touch in a minute on the work that men are already doing to do that. So this whole point about how national identity gets fused or bound together with a militarist identity came out very clearly in that Colombian research, and all the money that is spent to keep that happening. Not least the $8 billion I think from Plan Colombia from the US government over a decade or more. So let's turn to what men are doing to challenge this and what work is needed to support men to challenge this. So Jamila, let's hear from Afghanistan in terms of men's involvement in WILPF's work and the difficulties of that in a context where the whole economy in some ways around heroin production is organized to rely on using men to provide violent labor in support of that drug economy. So how do you get men to kind of resist that and challenge that?
Thank you for the question, Alan. I personally, even before joining WILPF, I was providing training for religious leaders in Afghanistan to protect and promote, to mobilize them to protect and promote women's rights in Afghanistan, because in our society, culture and religion is totally mixed up, and usually through any political power, it is said that it is religious or this is Sharia interpretation that we have to behave in certain ways and live in certain ways, men and women of societies. We have huge challenges even before Taliban regarding the mindset of society towards women. unusually women were not given the opportunities and the resources to become empowered and to play a prominent role in society. Therefore, I was engaged in Imam Initiative training program, in which I was training, provided training for 6,000 imams in 22 provinces of Afghanistan. And based on the new concept, working with WILPF and working in 4 other countries through Militarized Masculinity project, it was added value to our previous work. Besides religious scholars, we brought community leaders, we brought influential figure of the society, we brought professors from university, teachers, and some other influential figure of the society to join our Male Alliances movement, and how we all together can work towards demilitarization and work together towards a feminist peace, which is for the benefit of all human beings in the world, and especially in Afghanistan. It is never easy to challenge or to go to the opposite direction in which the country or the society is moving, and the society is accustomed to that type of status quo condition. Moving to opposite direction was always challenging, was always difficult, and we got a lot of resistance, especially from the influential figures, because actually we try to use very local methodologies. Like, we never used the term of feminist because it was creating more reaction, or it was more irritating for our society. Like, we always use the words of motherhood, sisterhood, unity, like the words which is very common, general, and not give the sense that anybody can be afraid of what we are doing. At the same time, as it was against the cultural setup of the society, against the behavior and attitude of a person, it was very difficult. But of course, with many times sitting together, discussing, bringing men, women on the same table to discuss, to negotiate, slowly and gradually there were some important impact. And we got a good number of male alliances, around 80 male alliances, that they were also very influential figure and joined our male alliances with imams. Unfortunately, with the takeover of Kabul by Taliban on 15th August 2021, the situation was totally changed. And now a militarized regime is ruling the country, and people are not able to raise their voices because of the persecution, because of the kidnaps, putting people in jail. But still our colleagues are working underground in certain ways and different ways, in order to pave the way for their sisters, for their family members, to be able to perform or to be active. Like some of the educational classes at home is initiated, some of the health centers at local level, at village level has initiated. And the man or brother of the family or community leaders have engaged with the local Taliban authority to provide permission for those to remain active. Although we observe strictly the segregation policies of Taliban, women are totally segregated or separated from men. On some of the area it is working, and unfortunately in some other areas it's not working. But at least those who have been engaged with us, they are struggling, they are working to be, and this is the only hope at the moment on the ground. So we are proud of our work with our male alliances. This is a really valuable mindset. I wish from very, very many years we would have worked on this area. And men and women are two wings of a bird, flying bird. If we are having any kind of deficiency in one of the wing, the other wing is also unable to fly. So men and women are equally responsible. We have the responsibility to equally work with them. Feminist peace is not possible without support of men. This is what I have learned in my personal life and in my work in Afghanistan through this project. Thank you.
Jamila. It's incredibly inspiring to hear about the way that the work is continuing, even in such difficult circumstances. So thank you for sharing that. Let me turn to Guy and Sylvie just to hear about what are you finding in Cameroon about men's involvement in feminist peace activism, and maybe say something about how that link, because I know one of the drivers of the conflict has been land rights struggles. So how have you thought about the way to link men's feminist peace activism with trying to address this issue of land and dispossession as a driver of the conflict? Guy?
Ok. Oui, merci. Ce que nous avons appris avec le travail que nous avons mené et que nous sommes encore en train de mener, déjà, c'est que le travail des hommes pour la paix porte énormément de fruits, parce que nous avons remarqué que les hommes ont un pouvoir, et le pouvoir que les hommes est capable de faire avancer l'agenda des femmes pour la paix et la sécurité. Donc, un homme a une position de pouvoir qui comprend que la participation des femmes pour la construction de la paix est déterminante, utilise son pouvoir pour faire participer plus de femmes. Et c'est ce que nous avons gagné en mettant en œuvre ce projet. Donc, cela part de la prise de conscience sur le fait que les hommes peuvent utiliser ce pouvoir pour faire avancer l'agenda et amener aussi les hommes à travailler ensemble avec les femmes. Donc, l'un des acteurs clés que nous avons pu bâtir, sur lesquels nous avons pu bâtir pour résoudre cette situation, pour revenir à la question des droits fonciers, par exemple, que vous avez évoqué, c'est que les leaders traditionnels en tant qu'acteurs ont été cette catégorie d'hommes sur lesquels nous nous sommes appuyés pour faire comprendre que les femmes ont le droit à la terre. Et pourquoi les leaders traditionnels en particulier? Parce que ce sont les garants des traditions, et dans notre contexte, ils ont toujours été considérés comme les fervents défenseurs des causes des hommes, des masculinités négatives, des masculinités parfois violentes. Et le fait de s'appuyer sur les leaders traditionnels a permis de déconstruire cette façon de penser. Et le film Power and Patrol est l'exemple, parce que l'acteur principal qui intervient pour le cas du Cameroun, c'est un leader traditionnel et dont la seule participation au projet permet de montrer aux autres leaders traditionnels que la perception que nous avons d'eux, ou alors que la société a d'eux, n'est pas toujours juste, parce que les leaders traditionnels ont la capacité de faire participer les femmes et de donner aux femmes leurs droits. Le leader traditionnel impliqué que j'ai mentionné tantôt a, par exemple, dans sa communauté, permis aux femmes d'accéder à la terre, que ce soit pour les tâches agricoles, que ce soit pour posséder, pour hériter même. Donc, lui-même, en tant que chef traditionnel, donne à ses filles des terres et permet aux autres filles de la communauté de savoir qu'elles ont des droits à l'héritage, qu'elles ont les droits à la terre et qu'elles peuvent revendiquer ce droit. Donc, elles peuvent revendiquer. Et les chefs traditionnels, avec l'appui des autorités administratives locales, peuvent donc justement faciliter l'accès des femmes à leurs droits à la terre. Donc, c'est un exemple fantastique que je voulais partager sur cette question-là. Merci.
Thanks, Guy. And quickly, Sylvie, because we need to turn to audience questions in a minute, but this whole question about elite impunity and corruption, I know it definitely came up in the Cameroon research as a driver of armed conflict, and obviously that is mostly men at the top in political power. So not just traditional leaders, but political leaders themselves and business owners. How are you linking this work on feminist peace activism with men to those issues of governance and impunity?
Thank you. When we conducted the research and had like a solidarity dialogue and interviews, these are some of the things that we wanted to draw attention on. So these are the things that are being discussed in the communities with these key stakeholders to say that some of the issues that we keep having is because of this impunity. So that is the essence of the methodology that we chose, to be able to use the focus group, to be able to use the direct interview, to be able to use all the opportunities, solidarity dialogue, to bring on the table all these issues which are a threat to the work that you are doing. So the study was a way to bring this discussion on the table and to start talking about it, so that it's not taboo again. So bringing it was a way for us to start talking about something which is considered taboo. Then talk about it, then people start thinking of, yes, it is a problem, what can we do about it? So this is number one. The second thing that we did was, yes, already mentioned, the use of traditional leaders to speak out. Speaking out is also, they have the power to talk about what is in their community a problem. And this is one of the things that came out as a problem, and having traditional leaders to speak up is also important. The last thing I want to mention.
Are you okay to speak him to Alan? That's what he asked.
The use, sorry?
No, go on, Sylvie.
Okay. Yes.
Finish your point.
Is the bringing media men and women on board. For some of these activities, we started doing it, and then we are going to continue the next project to bring media men and women on board, because these are who are helping to amplify the message and to draw attention on some of the things that are not okay. So the research aims at showing some of the loopholes, some of the shortcomings, and also some recommendations. Having a research is also to show the public, and we are going to keep spreading the result of the study.
Okay.
To make sure the Cameroon space, or the Cameroon authorities, the Cameroon people understand that impunity is not something very important, it's something which is really impeding the work for feminist peace. Okay. Yes.
Thanks,
Sylvie. So we want to draw attention, and when we do the advocacy, we make sure that we tell the stakeholder that we are targeting that we are working for peace in our country. We are working because we want to see peace happen. We want to deconstruct in their mind the idea that civil society is coming because we are standing against them. No, we want to show them that at the end of the day, we are working for the interests of our people. And working for the interests of our people means pointing out to these issues which constitute a threat. And this is one. So we try to plead, we try to advocate, we try to use language that are going to make them know that we are not standing against them. You want to use, you want to use them together to build this that we want to see happen in our community.
Okay, thanks, Sylvie. You were cutting in and out a bit on your sound there, so I don't know if you need to turn off and on the sound, but I think we got mainly what you were saying about we need to talk about these issues, right? In terms of impunity, land rights, the point that Verónica made about national identity. Guy, very quickly, because we need to go to audience questions.
Oui, rapidement, juste pour, puisque Sylvie n'était pas très bien écoutée, un point sur cette corruption. Il y a eu un cycle de corruption que nous avons noté avec les hommes qui sont à divers postes. Quand une femme, par exemple, a un problème et qu'elle se plaint, c'est un homme qui reçoit la plainte et c'est à un autre homme de traiter le problème. Et quand cet autre homme qui doit résoudre le problème prend le dossier, il peut facilement échanger avec l'homme qui est le bourreau pour mettre la femme en déroute. Et finalement, la corruption là fait en sorte que l'inégalité entre les gens persiste. Donc, c'est cet aspect-là que je voulais également relever.
Thanks, Guy. So I think this whole issue about what issues do we talk about when we talk about mobilizing men for feminist peace? And we're saying, you know, we need to be challenging these patriarchal gender norms and the conditions that help to fuel them, which are linked to economic inequalities, the land rights that we talked about, the political issues around governance and corruption, this whole issue about national identity that Verónica mentioned. So we need to be talking about those structural issues as well as helping men deal with the pressure that they face in their daily lives to get involved in armed conflict and the shame that is associated with their suffering. So we've put a lot on the table there. We can't possibly do justice to all the issues that were raised by the research, but let's turn to audience questions. So we have a few minutes now. Rebecca, Dania, do you have any major questions that came up?
Yeah, there's some great questions in the chat. I've got one from Julia Saltzman, who says, when talking about gender policy, the dialogue is often exclusive of discrimination or persecution faced by men. How can we utilize a non-binary approach to gender persecution that challenges perceptions of women solely as victims and men solely as persecutors?
Great. Who wants to take that? I think we've touched on that a little bit in terms of, you know, the whole discussion around men's suffering. Verónica, any thoughts on how we break that kind of binary? What's been your experience in Colombia?
Yeah, well, I think one of the things that we wanted to highlight in our research is that when we talk about, for example, soldiers in the military, in this perspective of confronting militarized masculinities, it may be sort of an instinctive reaction to think of soldiers as the persecutors or the reason why there are victims of war. But I think it's more complex than that. And when we realize that men who are in the military, for example, are also victims of this structural system that was created to make them join in and to make them believe that violence is something that they should practice. When we understand that it's not as easy as some people are victims, some people are not, there are a lot more factors that come into play, then we are able to sort of go beyond that binary without forgetting that there are people who are more affected by this in a physical sense. There are people who are more affected in an emotional sense. So there are various ways of looking at how war and conflict in general affect women and men, and there are different factors. You know, you can bring them all together and just think that we can go beyond all of that. But I think we can break the binary by thinking about how complex those factors are and how they're intertwining and interacting all the time in both cases.
Yeah, and within that we have issues around gender diversity, sexual diversity as well, which complicates that binary. So let's take another question.
Okay, we've got a question from Alejandra Moreno Jaramillo, who says, I believe that one of the biggest challenges that we have as researchers is to make our research accessible, not only to academia, but to civil society overall. Part of decolonizing knowledge is decolonizing the way we are researching. What are your proposals for reaching people outside academia that need to hear all of this? That's an important question.
Fantastic. Who wants to take that? How have you tried to get your research out to broader communities of people? Sylvie?
Yes, maybe I can say something.
Merci pour la parole. En parlant des hommes, nous avons interviewé des hommes qui ont rejoint l'armée, par exemple. Les hommes dans l'armée soulignent le rôle de contrôle, de respect et honneur en tant que militaire qui défend la population et qui est le patron en même temps de sa famille et qui est supérieur à la femme. Le désir d'honneur et de respect à travers les statuts militaires, par exemple, comme armes qui donnent le pouvoir et le contrôle, sont les motivations données par les interviewés pour rejoindre l'armée. Être respecté des autres, être une personne que les autres craignent, cette position de force, d'offrir certains avantages de tout genre, notamment les avantages pécuniaires. Parce que vous savez, quand l'homme tient l'arme, à ce moment-là, il a le pouvoir même d'avoir les avantages pécuniaires. Par exemple, certains militaires ont choisi l'armée quand ils ont été inspirés par des membres de leur famille, faisant déjà partie de l'armée et qui étaient bien respectés dans la communauté et dans la famille. Ces hommes se sont sentis également motivés pour protéger le pays. Les hommes et les garçons qui ont rejoint l'armée gagnent le respect et l'honneur des autres. Le fait qu'ils portent l'uniforme. Nous avons vu ça quand on a fait notre film. Les hommes qui portent l'uniforme se considèrent comme supérieurs par rapport aux hommes civils, le fait qu'ils ont l'arme à la main. D'autres étaient principalement motivés pour trouver des sources de revenus afin de subvenir aux besoins de leur famille. La discipline, l'ordre et les statuts militaires ont été mentionnés aussi comme une incitation importante à se sentir fier et respecté dans la communauté. Mais il y a aussi quelques personnes qui disaient l'armée n'a pas rendu à tous ces hommes le respect et le pouvoir et qu'ils espéraient. Parce qu'ils étaient parfois humiliés, attaqués par d'autres groupes ethniques et même par d'autres soldats en pillant leurs champs, par exemple les champs de femmes, en violant les femmes et tout ça. Donc il y a des hommes
Annie,
qui sont...
Annie, we're going to have to just finish your thought because we're going to have to close out soon.
Hello?
Sorry, I didn't want to cut you off, Annie, but we are getting short on time. So just finish what you were saying and then we can come back to the group.
Ok, je pourrais terminer en disant que dans le cas de la RDC, par exemple, je suis en train de... Il y a des personnes qui disaient, je suis entrée dans le groupe des rébellions parce que j'étais déçue de voir ma mère être violée en présence de toute la famille et je suis rentrée dans l'armée pour me venger. Donc, ce problème de militarisation au sein de l'armée, c'est quand même un problème qui a des profondes causes que nous avons essayé de démanteler pour donner des conclusions et faire des recommandations. Par exemple, il faut appuyer le système d'alerte et de monitoring pour la prévention des conflits. Parce que dans le cas de la RDC, nous sommes réellement en conflit, mais il faut aussi vulgariser, par exemple, le code minier, parce que le conflit que nous avons en RDC, c'est le conflit économique aussi de notre côté, et organiser aussi des audiences foraines. Quand on attrape ces militaires qui violent ou qui tuent, il faut qu'ils soient jugés pour qu'il n'y ait pas d'impunité, parce que les problèmes d'impunité aussi augmentent cette militarisation. Et enfin, il fallait qu'on puisse aussi maîtriser les statistiques des militaires ou des policiers que nous n'arrivons pas à réellement maîtriser pour faire face à cette masculinité militarisée. Merci beaucoup.
Thanks, Annie. And you've touched on a lot of the issues there that we've been reviewing, right, in terms of the structural issues around the economy and the personal feelings of revenge and loss of respect that men may feel. You mentioned the film. I mean, I think the film is a great example of a way to get research findings out to a broader audience, but I think that is a continuing challenge that we all face, and we need to be, you know, reflecting on that question about how we do use this research to get out to the broader sets of people who need to hear it as a way to change social attitudes and political leadership, to put pressure on our leaders to change. So I think we're more or less out of time. Let me turn over to Laxman to close us out with some final thoughts, and to say from my side, thank you to all the presenters. That was a wonderful conversation, and we've really just scratched the surface of all the information that came out of the research, but thank you all. Laxman.
Thank you. So wonderful. So, you know, really thankful and really grateful to all of you for sharing your insights. So rich conversation and so much for us to learn and take forward and work on addressing the topics that you have raised, and also helping us realize how complex this process would look like. And the work with particularly, you know, transforming masculinities, and particularly looking at the intersections of militarization and masculinities, and how gender comes into the interplay on socializing every one of us across our life cycle, or, you know, sort of life, to be pulled into either support or, you know, be part of these militaristic systems, and also to learn from, you know, what you all have been doing in terms of the agenda of feminist peace and analysis that is coming from that. So I think we at MenEngage really appreciate that and are willing to really work further with all of you very closely in this, you know, addressing some of the problems that we have identified together in this research. And I think I really admire, and I see some of the comments coming out on the decolonization of the research. So that was very evident with the speakers from all over the world speaking for yourself, right? So not someone speaking for you, and which is the normal trend we see. And I think with this project that outlines, and we would like to continue down this route so that we can really and genuinely walk the talk on decolonizing the research, the knowledge base, and the owners of the knowledge are those who have the knowledge and information, rather than being just a provider of information. So I think challenging that also part of. And I think, you know, one thing that is also coming clear, that the phenomena are not just out there, but it's inherent in our own homes as well. How much it is, you know, part of our own social upbringing and family systems, institutions around us, and that these complex processes also reinforce and promote anti-gender, anti-feminist, anti-human rights agenda and rhetoric, you know, in the name of either family or in the name of culture, and how the patriarchal binary and operationalizing within that creates a kind of a system where we are. But also there, it's important to look at this formal, but also more and more informal and hidden settings and players within that. We talk about conflict in a particular country, but then forget, there are some comments in the chat that we forget about the role of international players on reinforcing and their interest in keeping those wars and conflict in mind. And some of you also alluded to that. So I think we need to then further work together, those, in this particular feminist peace agenda and with MenEngage and WILPF, we really look forward to working and unpacking further on what this means in practice and how can we really bring about the change that we are all aiming for. And thank you once again, Alan, for your facilitation. Thank you everyone for joining us today. Hope we will continue having you joining us in these webinars moving forward. Thank you to Rebecca and the team for all the work and supporting us in hosting the webinar. And thanks to Dean and Angelica on the back for all the prep work you have done, and to the WILPF team who have been instrumental in making this a possibility. And a big thanks to the speakers, obviously. Thank you so much. And you all have a good rest of the day where you are, where you're morning, evening, afternoon, and take care, stay well, be safe, and see you soon.
Thanks, Laxman. The work continues. Let's keep in touch. Bye, everyone.
Take care.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Thank you.
See you. Au revoir.